Hello everyone, this is Dr. P. Mary Anupama, Assistant Professor from the Department of Biochemistry, St. Joseph's College for Women. Today, let us study about porphyrin metabolism. The contents explained in this video include biosynthesis and degradation of porphyrins, the production of bile pigments, and inborn errors of porphyrin metabolism. First, let us understand the structure of porphyrins. These are a group of heterocyclic macrocyclic organic compounds composed of four modified pyrrole subunits interconnected at their alpha carbon atom via methane bridges. The parent of porphyrin is porphine, a rare chemical compound of exclusively theoretical interest. Substituted porphyrins or porphins, they are called porphyrins. Substituted porphins are called porphyrins. This is a single pyrrole unit which can be represented like this also, and the tetrapyrroles are presented like this, that is 1, 2, 3 and 4 tetrapyrroles which are linked by methylene bridges. They constitute or they form what is known as a porphin molecule, and it is represented like this also, that is C20, H14 and N4. Derivatives of porphyrin structure. This is the porphin, which is the simplest porphyrin, and it is a very rare compound of theoretical interest. While here is the derivative of this porphyrin, which is the protoporphyrin 9, which is a very common compound present in the nature and is the precursor for heme. It has methyl vinyl and methyl acetyl structures attached to it. Another derivative of interest is uroporphyrin 3. If this is the porphin, okay, it has 8 points where substitutions can take place, and here are the substitutions. It has acetyl propyl substitutions AP, AP, AP and PA. Here it is PA. The substitutions to the porphyrin ring, they can be symmetric or asymmetric. Example for symmetric are the uroporphyrin 1 and coproporphyrin 1. You can see at the position 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8 is the same AP, 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 AP. This is symmetric substitution. While in uroporphyrin 3 is an example for asymmetric substitution where you have PA at the fourth pyrrole ring. Same way coproporphyrin has methyl and propyl groups uniformly, so this is the symmetric one, while here it is propyl and methyl at the 4 pyrrole ring, hence this is an asymmetric substitution. So coproporphyrin 1 is symmetric while coproporphyrin 3 is asymmetric. We have one more derivative which is tetraphenyl porphyrin. It is another synthetic analog of protoporphyrin 9. Unlike the natural porphyrin ligands, this TPP it is highly symmetrical in nature. While here is the heme, which is a very complex protoporphyrin 9 derivative, and it is highly asymmetric in nature. When this protoporphyrin 3 or 9, when they are attached or chelated with iron in the presence of ferrochelatase, they form this heme. So heme is the prosthetic group which is attached to this asymmetric porphyrin of protoporphyrin, which is a derivative, okay, of heme. Heme is derived from protoporphyrin 9. You get it only after chelation with iron. Here is a table which is showing various forms of heme, heme A, heme B, heme C and heme D. Their molecular formula is written here, and then the functional groups present at C3 and at C8 as well as at C18, they are written here. You have that methyl, vinyl, formyl substitutions as well as cysteinase substitutions which are there in the case of heme C. So we have various derivatives, various side chains which are attached over here, thereby making the heme exist in 4 different forms: heme A, heme B, heme C and heme D. Now let us see biosynthesis of heme. The committed step in the biosynthesis of heme is the formation of this delta aminolevulinic acid, which is abbreviated as delta ALA, ALA, 5-ALA or DALA. and this reaction involves condensation between glycine and succinyl-CoA catalyzed by the enzyme ALA synthetase. The succinyl-CoA comes from citric acid cycle. So in the initial step, which requires the cofactor pyridoxal phosphate, condensation between glycine and succinyl-CoA results in the formation of alpha amino beta keto adipate. This alpha amino beta keto adipate undergoes decarboxylation to form the delta amino levulinate. This is the committed step for porphyrin biosynthesis. The next step is again a condensation reaction between two molecules of delta amino levulinate. The reaction is catalyzed by ALA dehydratase, resulting in the removal of two water molecules, and you get porphobilinogen PBG, which contains the precursor for the pyrrole. So this is our PBG, which is porphobilinogen. The third step involves again condensation of four molecules of PBG. These are combined, and then the reaction is catalyzed by uroporphyrinogen synthase, and it's a deamination reaction. When four of these are condensing together, then four amino groups are released off, and it results in hydroxymethylbilane HMB, which again undergoes reaction or circularization, okay, and forms the circular tetrapyroles of uroporphyrinogen, either uroporphyrinogen 3 or uroporphyrinogen 1. 1 or 3 will be formed. So when it is uroporphyrinogen 1, it is a spontaneous cyclization which is taking place. But when you have this type 3 to be formed, it is synthase as well as co-synthase of uroporphyrinogen will be there, and when these two enzymes come together, it results in this type 3 form of uroporphyrinogen, which is asymmetric. The uroporphyrinogen, which is formed previously, the type 3 molecule, it undergoes further modifications. Many intermediates of different species are formed, and finally in human beings the main end product is the protoporphyrin 9, which is combined with the iron to form the heme. So bile pigments, they are broken down and the products of heme. So here you can see this is protoporphyrin 3 or protoporphyrin 9. By the enzyme ferrochelatase, iron is incorporated and you have heme. We can see the side chains there. In the first one, first pyrrole has methyl vinyl, second has methyl vinyl, third has methyl propyl, while the fourth has propyl and methyl substitutions. Now let us understand the pathway through this diagram. From protoporphyrinogen, you get hydroxymethylbilane, and this reaction is catalyzed by uroporphyrinogen 1 synthase. When spontaneous cyclization is taking place, we get uroporphyrinogen 1, which upon decarboxylation will result in coproporphyrinogen 1. In the presence of light, this uroporphyrinogen is converted to uroporphyrin and it loses hydrogens, that is it's an oxidation reaction. Even the same way, coproporphyrinogen undergoes oxidation in the presence of light, losing 6 protons to form coproporphyrin. Now, in the presence of this uroporphyrinogen 3 co-synthase and uroporphyrinogen 1 synthase, this hydroxymethylbilane undergoes this cyclization in an asymmetric way, resulting in uroporphyrinogen 3. And we know that uroporphyrinogen 3 in the presence of light, again it undergoes oxidation, losing 6 protons to form uroporphyrin 3. Then uroporphyrinogen 3 can undergo decarboxylation catalyzed with the same enzyme uroporphyrinogen decarboxylase to form coproporphyrinogen 3. Coproporphyrinogen upon oxidation will result in coproporphyrin 3. So these reactions take place in the cytosol. Now this coproporphyrinogen 3 can enter mitochondria where it is oxidized. We have coproporphyrinogen oxidase that converts this coproporphyrinogen into protoporphyrinogen 3. Again, protoporphyrinogen oxidase oxidizes this protoporphyrin 3, or in this presence of this enzyme, or even in the presence of light also in vitro, oxidation of this protoporphyrinogen 3 occurs and it results in protoporphyrin 3, which is the precursor for heme. This protoporphyrin 3, it takes up iron in the presence of ferrochelatase to form heme. So we see that all these reactions, they are taking place in the mitochondria. Let us understand the pathway again through this diagram. We have initial condensation of glycine with succinyl-CoA to form delta aminolivulinate. The reaction is catalyzed by ALA synthetase, which comes from the gene which is transcribed in the presence of this iron binding elements. When iron binding elements are there, it induces the synthesis of ALA synthetase, which catalyzes the condensation of glycine and succinyl-CoA to form delta aminolivulinate. Now this delta aminolivulinate is produced in the mitochondria. Now the next thing is formation of porphobilinogen. So ALA dehydratase is present in cytosol. So from porphobilinogen to coproporphyrinogen 3, all these reactions are taking place in the cytosol. So in the cytoplasm, the coproporphyrinogen which is synthesized, it undergoes oxidation and results in protoporphyrinogen 3 that enters the mitochondria again. And in the mitochondria, we see that heme synthesis is taking place. Now this heme has to condense with the hemoglobin. So this is transported into the cytoplasm again, where it combines with the globin chain and then results in hemoglobin. So this is how hemoglobin is produced by our cells. So here we can see the enzymes and their where they are located inside the cell, the substrates and the products. ALA synthetase is present in the mitochondria, which results in delta aminolivulinate, while ALA dehydratase, which is present in the cytosol, results in porphobilinogen. So PPG deaminase results in this hydroxymethylbalane, which has to undergo cyclization. The cyclization is taking place in the cytosol only, where we are getting the uroporphyrinogen 3, and then this uroporphyrinogen 3 uh, that again results in coproporphyrinogen 3, and you have the next one is the coproporphyrinogen oxidase presence, which is seen in the mitochondria. So here coproporphyrinogen 3 is the substrate for that, where you get this protoporphyrinogen, and finally the ferrochelatase incorporates the iron and results in the synthesis of heme. This heme is transported into the cytoplasm. This is the summary of the reactions once again. Regulation of heme synthesis. The first step is the rate limiting step, which is catalyzed by ALA synthetase, that is delta aminolivulinate synthetase, and this is inhibited by heme. You have the feedback inhibition which is taking place, and if heme is in excess, the first enzyme is inhibited. So you have a situation where consumption of pesticides, insecticides or pharmaceuticals, that can increase the concentration levels of this hepatic delta aminolivulinate synthetase levels. So here we see that these things are to be metabolized in the liver, and this metabolism consumes cytochrome P450. So this cytochrome P450, it's a derivative of heme. So since heme is diverted for the synthesis of cytochrome P450, lots of this protoporphyrinogen 9, it goes off there, diminishing the heme availability for hemoglobin synthesis. So what happens is, because we need heme again, this delta aminolivulinate synthetase levels, they are increased. So that is how these three are contributing to increased levels of AMLEV synthetase. The porphyrias. Porphyrias, they lead to excretion of porphyrins or its precursors. So porphyrias, they are either inherited or they are acquired, and we see that porphyrias, if they are inherited, they are again divided into three general groups. So we have this erythropoietic porphyria, then we have this hepatic porphyria, And we also have this erythropoietic or hepatic porphyria. So we have three groups: erythropoietic, hepatic, and erythropoietic or hepatic porphyrias. The first condition is congenital erythropoietic porphyria. This is an autosomal recessive disease, and it is suspected that the enzyme uroporphyrinogen 1 synthetase and or uroporphyrinogen 3 co-synthetase are responsible for that. And the predominant site where you find increased expression is in the case of erythroid cells. Next is hepatic porphyrias. Hepatic, the name itself is indicating that porphyrin synthesis is more in the liver. Again, you have several types under this. We have intermittent acute porphyria. Intermittent acute porphyria is an autosomal dominant disease which is because of the increased expression of uroporphyrinogen 1 synthetase. Then we have hereditary coproporphyria, which is an autosomal dominant disease, and the enzyme that is responsible is coproporphyrinogen oxidase, which is found in the liver. Then we have this variegata porphyria, which is also autosomal dominant, and the enzyme that is responsible for this is protoporphyrin oxidase. Then we have Porphyria cutanea tarda, which is an autosomal dominant disease, which is because of the defect in the enzyme uroporphyrinogen decarboxylase. Next is toxic porphyria. This is an acquired disease, and you see that the reasons for this are variable, and you find that in the liver. Then we have protoporphyria, which is an autosomal dominant one once again. Then the enzyme that is responsible is ferrochelatase. So you can find this either in the erythroid cells or liver cells. So we have erythroid cells, then hepatic porphyrias, then hepatic and erythroid porphyrias. In the case of acute intermittent porphyria, the enzyme that is defective is porphobilinogen deaminase. So because of which this porphobilinogen level increases, and thereby you find it in the urine or it is excreted. Then you have this protoporphyria cutanea tarda, which is because of the defect in uroporphyrinogen decarboxylase. You find increased levels of uroporphyrinogen 3. Then in the case of hereditary coproporphyria, you have coproporphyrinogen oxidase, which is defective, leading to the increased accumulation of the coproporphyrinogen 3 or uroporphyrinogen 3. Then lastly we have this protoporphyrinogen oxidase. If this is defective, as in the case of variegata porphyria, you find accumulation of all these porphyrins. Now what is porphyria? Porphyria, here por means fear, porphyria. It refers to a group of diseases that result from building up of the natural chemicals that produce porphyrins in our body. High levels of porphyrins can cause many problems. So there are two general categories of porphyrias. We have what are known as acute porphyrias, which mainly affect the nervous system and the cutaneous system. Okay, nervous system, there in the case of acute it affects the nervous system, and in the case of cutaneous it mainly affects the skin. Then there are some types of porphyrias which have both nervous system symptoms as well as skin symptoms, so that is they are affecting the both. Signs and symptoms of porphyrias, they usually vary. First, let us learn about acute porphyrias. Acute porphyrias, as we know, they exhibit nervous system symptoms. So these appear very quickly and can be severe also. Symptoms they may last for a few days to weeks, and acute intermittent porphyria is the most common form of acute porphyrias. And the signs and symptoms of acute porphyrias, these may include abdominal pain, pain in the chest, legs, back, constipation or diarrhea, nausea and vomitings, muscle pain, tingling, numbness, weakness or paralysis, and red or brown urine like this, mental changes such as anxiety, confusion, hallucinations, disorientation or paranoia, and breathing problems, urination problems, rapid or irregular heartbeats, they can feel palpitations, high blood pressure, seizures. All these are the symptoms of acute porphyrias. Then we have cutaneous porphyrias. Pure Porphyria cutanea tarda, abbreviated as PCT, it's the most common type of this type of porphyrias associated with the skin. Symptoms include sensitivity to sun and sometimes artificial light, and they can cause burning pain, sudden painful skin, redness of skin like erythema, swelling, edema, blisters on exposed skin, usually hands, arms, face, fragile thin skin with changes in skin color like a pigmentation change, you'll see itching sensation, excessive hair growth in the infected area, and as usual red on brown urine. Here you can see the erythema and burning sort of things which are found on the exposed skin. These are the blisters and this is erythema. After studying all this heme synthesis and the porphyrias, now we shall go ahead with degradation of heme. So we see that degradation of heme means heme has to be degraded into biliverdin then followed by bilirubin. All this takes place in the macrophages. Then through the bile duct it is transported to the intestine where this bile pigments enter there. These are acted upon by the microbial flora over there. You get urobilinogen or stercobilinogen and stercobilin production. You have urobilinogen which enters back into the liver, that is the macrophages, through enterohepatic circulation or the portal system. So let us see this in detail now. We know that spleen is the graveyard for RBC. So degradation of heme, it begins in the macrophages of the spleen where the damaged or the old erythrocytes, they are removed from the circulation. And the first step here is that heme is to be converted to biliverdin by the enzyme heme oxygenase, abbreviated as HMOX. NADPH is used as the reducing agent in this reaction. Molecular oxygen enters the reaction, carbon monoxide is produced, and the iron which is released in that from the molecule, it is released in ferrous ion form. And carbon monoxide, it acts as a cellular messenger, and this functions in vasodilation. So when exhalation of carbon dioxide has taken place and the splitting of the tetrapyrrole ring has taken place, that results in the production of biliverdin, which is then reduced to bilirubin. So this bilirubin which is formed, you know that it is excreted from the liver through the bile. Now this enters the duodenum. So excretion of bilirubin from the liver to the biliary caliculi is an active, energy dependent and rate limiting process. Now the intestinal bacteria, they deconjugate this bilirubin diglucuronate and convert the bilirubin to urobilinogens. Some urobilinogen is absorbed by the intestinal cells and then transported into the kidneys and excreted in the urine. You get urobilin in the urine, which is the product of oxidation of urobilinogen. And this imparts yellow color to the urine. The remainder it again travels down the digestive tract, then it is converted to stercobilin. This stercobilin is further oxidized to this stercobilinogen is further oxidized to stercobilin, which is then excreted through the feces. So the brown color of the feces is because of stercobilin. So here is the pathway. We have the heme. This heme enters this microsomal heme oxygenase system where it is oxidized and you get this heme being acted upon by NADPH. So reduction is taking place, oxygen enters and you get release of carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is exhaled, iron is removed here, iron can be reutilized, oxygen enters this pathway, and finally what you get is the open chain of biliverdin where this chain is broken and you get this open chain over here. Now this is further reduced to form bilirubin. So here we have the bilirubin, which is and which enters into the duodenum via the biliary duct in the bile. The important points that here we have to study is the transport of this bilirubin. We have this high affinity albumin which takes up the bilirubin, and as it reaches the liver it is taken up by this albumin. So this is mediated via sinusoidal surfaces of the hepatocytes by carrier mediated system. So it enters the liver. Then again the conjugation of bilirubin that results in bilirubin diglucuronide. This is by the enzyme uridine diphosphate glucuronate glucuronyl transferase. This conjugation makes the bilirubin to be more soluble. So this is the soluble form. So I mean to say conjugated form of bilirubin, it is a more soluble form, while unconjugated form is fat soluble. Now let us see the entire pathway in detail. Bilirubin metabolism. So we have RBC breaking down taking place, or cytochrome uh, breakdown, or premature RBC destruction. All these will lead to the production of the heme. Say if it is hemoglobin, we have globin plus heme which break down and result in heme production. From the heme, iron is removed and it is transported by transferrin for its storage organ, that is liver, where again it is reutilized for the synthesis of heme. Next, this heme, it undergoes several reduction steps by the microsomal oxygenase system, and we get biliverdin followed by another reductase acting upon it to get bilirubin. So we know that this bilirubin is the unconjugated form which is fat soluble, and this is transported by albumin. Now we have this bilirubin which binds to the albumin, to the sites on the albumin. Now here we have this conjugation taking place. We have uridine diphosphate glucuronate glucuronyl transferase, which is present in the endoplasmic reticulum of liver, that results in the production of conjugated bilirubin, which is soluble form. Actually this soluble form is transported to the bile. Now this bile, it is stored in the gallbladder, and upon stimulation this form, it is excreted, and you have this whatever that is excreted, it is acted upon by the bacterial of by the bacteria of the intestine, and it gets unconjugated here, and it can result in stercobilin that imparts color to the faces, and you have this urobilinogen which is produced, from which stercobilin is produced. This urobilinogen, it can enter the enterohepatic circulation. So here this bilirubin, it's unconjugated over here, and then here it is a fat soluble one which enters the intrahepatic circulation and is again back for another round of conjugation. While some of the urobilinogen, it reaches the kidney where it is converted to urobilin, which imparts yellow color to the urine. So this is how conjugation and conjugation of bilirubin is taking place, and it is reabsorbed. What is reabsorbed is this urobilinogen is reabsorbed into intrahepatic circulation as it is fat soluble. Now here again it is conjugated and you have the water soluble form. Water soluble form goes back through the bile, enters the intestine, and here itself it is unconjugated. So all these are the series of events which take place when it comes to bilirubin metabolism. Now we shall see the disorders or abnormalities associated with heme degradation. The first one is hyperbilirubinemia. In this, the concentration of bilirubin in the blood, it is more than 1 milligram per deciliter. And the reasons are overproduction of bilirubin. It can be because of hepatic damage or because of obstruction in biliary ducts. So increase in bilirubin, if it is taking place in the blood, we know that this bilirubin, it can diffuse through the tissues. It is a soluble form which can diffuse into the tissues, and finally it can impart yellow color to the skin. So hyperbilirubinemia, it can be detected by the yellowness of the skin, and the concentration of bilirubin will be more than 1 milligram per deciliter of blood. So here we have two types of hyperbilirubinemias. One you call it as the retention one, the other one is regurgitation. Retention one is because of the excretion of unconjugated bilirubin. We know that unconjugated bilirubin, it is fat soluble. So this fat soluble form, it can cross the blood brain barrier, enter the central nervous system, and it can lead to encephalopathy, which means the mental state will be altered. Now this can also enter into the liver, and it can result in achloric jaundice. Now coming to the regurgitation. Here it is the conjugated bilirubin which is excreted. So this conjugated bilirubin, we know that it is water soluble. So definitely it appears in the urine and it imparts yellow color to the skin. This you call it as chloruric jaundice. Second one is unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. This is an acquired defect or inherited abnormality, and this is seen in neonatal stages, and it is a physiological jaundice, associated with physiological jaundice. And the reasons are increased hemolysis and immature RBC production will be taking place in the hepatic system. So this will lead to low uptake of bilirubin. So low conjugation will be taking place. So more of unconjugated bilirubin will be there. So if more of unconjugated bilirubin is there, we know that it can cross the blood-brain barrier and it can lead to toxic encephalopathy. The remedy is here, the kid is exposed to visible light, and it is said that exposure to visible light, taking the baby for a sun bath, they put them in the sunlight like that, it promotes hepatic excretion. So here you can see this hepatic excretion will be again a soluble form. If hepatic excretion is taking place, that means you have lots of soluble bilirubin. So therefore it cannot cross the blood-brain barrier and the symptoms will be reduced. Third one is congenital non-hemolytic jaundice. This is a rare autosomal disorder, and it is because of the absence of this UDP glucuronide transferase. That means the conjugation of bilirubin will not be taking place, and therefore the unconjugated bilirubin will be there, which can cross the blood-brain barrier. And once again, as in the previous case, wherein the baby is exposed to sunlight, here also the treatment is phototherapy. Now the disease, it can be fatal within 15 months. It can lead to death. The fourth type is Gilbert's disease. Here the defect is in hepatic clearance of bilirubin. So this can be because of defect in parenchymal cells or decrease in UDP glucuronide transferase. Then we have chronic idiopathic jaundice. This is an autosomal recessive disorder, and the defect is in hepatic secretion of conjugated bilirubin into the bile. So this soluble form will enter the skin, into the tissues, into the skin, and impart yellow color to the skin. Biliary tree obstruction. The name itself is indicating that there is a blockage in the bile ducts. This increases the bilirubin levels in the blood. So obviously it is absorbed into the hepatic veins, into the lymphatics, then it enters into the skin, imparting yellow color to the skin. Then we have hemolytic jaundice. Increase in bilirubin in the urine. It is because of increased urobilinogen. And the reasons, it can be increased destruction of RBC or increase in biliary passage. All these can lead to hemolytic jaundice. Most of the content in this presentation is taken up from this Harper's Biochemistry 29th edition. Thank you for watching this video.